simple things like the feel of the house. Does it feel sweaty? Does it feel drafty? Is there moisture sort of running down the walls? Does there seem to be moisture content sitting in around areas on the wall, side walls, or on the roof, etc., just which would indicate no airflow? Or even the like of just the smell of the house itself. Does the house smell fresh enough? Is it stuffy, or could it potentially even be too fresh?
Hello and welcome to the Poultry Edge with me, Rebecca Tierney. We're focusing on all the latest news, information and advice for Irish poultry producers. In this episode, we will discuss ventilation systems and poultry units, a vital equipment setup in any poultry house, an area which has been discussed a lot in recent weeks and months during the longest heat wave we've experienced in recent decades. I'm delighted to be joined by Stephen Lester from JF McKenna. Stephen, we start off very basic. What is the purpose of the ventilation system in a poultry unit? And then to follow on from that, what type of ventilation systems are available to poultry producers?
The main purpose of a ventilation system in any poultry unit is to create, a controlled, optimal environment, obviously for the welfare of the bird itself, whether it be a laying hen or a broiler or a breeder. And also even for the person themselves working in the sheds, it's as much important just to have that good welfare environment for everybody. And then leading on to the next one about the types of systems you have out there. So I suppose typically with ourselves, we'd have mainly forced ventilation, and your natural ventilation system would be a main sort of standard with us. But you also do move into your tunnel ventilation, as you said, your reverse flow, which wouldn't be commonly known, but they are out there. Reverse flow, which is your fans on the side and your inlets on the roof. And then obviously you have your equal pressure systems as well, which would be mainly for the like of your layers. Some free range would have them just because of the pop holes and that, just to create a better environment for the birds to want to go outside through the pop holes.
Okay, so there's definitely plenty of systems out there. But how can a farmer know that their ventilation system is working correctly in their own house? What would some signs be that it's potentially not working, or if they need to make some changes to the settings on their ventilation system?
On the leg of that, even just the there's a lot of sort of common signs I would just, even for anybody that would be chatting to ventilation about, even just if you walked into the shed yourself and stood for a few minutes just at the front of the house without disturbing the birds themselves too much. Simple things like just the feel of the house. Does it feel sweaty? Does it feel drafty? Is there moisture sort of running down the walls? Does there seem to be moisture content sitting in around areas on the wall, side walls, or on the roof, etc., just which would indicate no airflow? Or even the like of just the smell of the house itself. Does the house smell fresh enough? Is it stuffy, or could it potentially even be too fresh? Birds themselves will tell you a lot. Are the birds huddling up? Do they seem to be trying to sit a lot at the walls, trying to get away from different airflows? Things like that. The birds themselves will nearly tell you quite a lot. But just for somebody walking in at a quick glance, even just how the house feels for the farmer themselves when they step in.
Okay, the likes of cobwebs and things like that building up, you often hear that as a sign. Is that a giveaway as well, that there's not maybe enough ventilation moving through the house?
Correct. That's a big sign as well. We see that typically quite a lot in breeder houses, that typically over the period of years that they've sort of been trying to run slightly lower pressures and things, and it nearly comes from the like of that more. So you're not actually getting the airflow in the correct place, so the air is not traveling across the roof correctly. It's nearly the biggest cause of cobwebs. Because your air is obviously not traveling tight against the roof where it needs to be, and then therefore there's no actual airflow up there to keep the cobwebs, if you like, from forming, because there's obviously it's a stagnant area of airflow.
Yeah, so I suppose you just mentioned there about moving the air across the roof. You're if we take a negative pressure system, your air is moving in across from the side inlets. Where are we aiming for that air to go? How should it move through the house? Just so a farmer or anyone listening is aware the exact direction of travel for that air should be.
So typically, yeah, as I say, it'd be on a forced ventilation system. Obviously, the fundamentals are all trying to do the same thing, but it's obviously easier with a forced ventilation rather than natural ventilated, but it's still the same idea. But with a forced ventilation system, you're bringing your air through the sides, inlets, you're exhausting it out to the ridge. what you're typically trying to do is bring that air in through your inlets and keep it to the roof for the longest period possible, because obviously that air is coming in full of moisture. And that air tight again the roof as far as we possibly can to the middle of that, just close to the middle, maybe you'd be talking half a meter back from the middle. You'd be expecting that air to start to turn and come back across the floor, which means that air has set again the ceiling where your heat bank is. Obviously, reduce the moisture level in it as much as it possibly can, and then that air is fit to travel across the floor, obviously bringing your fresh air to your birds. But also, because we've obviously extracted a certain amount of the moisture out of it, we're able then to collect, it will naturally collect a certain amount of the moisture out of your air that's in your chicken house, and then returns back up with the next air coming in and obviously expels out through the exhaust.
Yeah, so it's that whole movement of lose moisture, nice fresh air for our birds, and the exhaust air leaving the house is a very important point. We've experienced, I suppose, an extended period of hot weather over the last kind of 6 to 8 weeks from the end of June. In times like that, what can farmers do to improve ventilation if they feel there's a problem with airflow throughout the house? What extra steps can farmers take to help birds in those kind of hotter periods?
It's been a big talking point, I suppose, this last few weeks, with just, and then especially with the hot weather staying day on day, it naturally nearly builds up over a period of time as well. Like, I was speaking with quite a lot of growers just around that period of time that weren't used to maybe just reacting to the hot weather. We're not that used to it. But the biggest thing is to do, what I would find is, um, early on in the morning, before your day starts to pick up, the main hottest temperature would be go down and obviously force your ventilation system to 100% ventilation early on in the morning. Now, by doing that, you're basically trying to sort of play a wee bit of catch up. Whereas your house, you may, yes, pull your house temperature down, but you won't bring it anywhere near where you want your set point to be, regardless anyway. You won't be dropping it way, but I would leave that 100% ventilation, either depending on the age of birds, running just all night, which some of our guys did do, or some of the gay farmers did do, because it just had big birds and the temperatures at night were quite high. But we would have said, let that 100% ventilation at least run on until sort of your last check at night, maybe would be 11 o'clock with most growers, which just meant the house had a good period of time to cool itself down and get the birds back to a temperature that they felt comfortable with.
A very difficult time for growers and birds alike. Probably something we're maybe looking at in the years and decades to come. So very important to be aware of those things to change. From one season to the next, I suppose that's just how things go. We're moving into the winter months now. In the next little while, ventilation can be tricky in those months as well. How can a farmer ensure that there's enough fresh air flow into the house without chilling the birds? Because we're obviously trying to keep fresh air, but not bring in the colder air that should be there during those winter months.
Yeah, so just back even to simple things like, it's something we see quite a lot of, because it just can be easily forgot about whenever you're trying to keep those birds cooler over the warmer period, is look at, you do have your curves and your bird weights, etc. Now, you would tend to find not a lot of people would change those, but some people do. So they may have changed bird weight ratios to try and give them a wee bit more minimum ventilation early on and things like that. Just being mindful that the like of those are changed. Some people may put in extra vent on their sides to have their sides maybe coming a bit further down than they need to be a bit earlier on, which can be a big thing for drafting birds, because if you were sort of advancing your inlets a bit, but your fans weren't advanced the same, you'd obviously have a wee bit more airfall. Now, obviously, when we're in the warmer weather, we're not that concerned with the air getting around the birds themselves, but certainly when we move into the winter months, it would cause other issues. Um, Another big thing is just bandwidths and stuff. So, say you had your set point there, just say take a set point of 25 degrees, and you would have possibly like a start vent temperature of maybe another 1 degree before you'd be starting to advance your ventilation. And then the next bandwidth would be like a 4 degree bandwidth, which you would have in for basically how quick your ventilation you get to 100%. It's just bandwidths like that we'd find quite a lot would be changed in the summer weather to hold temperatures a bit tighter and closer. Whereas when we move into the winter time, those bandwidths can be a wee bit um, they're just a bit exaggerated for what you're trying to keep the ventilation system a bit more gradual rather than it being so vigorous, just a change in temperatures. So it can cause ventilation to ramp up and down quite quickly, which would cause drafts and birds.
Lots for producers to consider there for the moving from one season to the next. Ventilation is clearly an important factor for bird health and welfare and performance, but it's an important factor for litter quality as well. What impact can, I suppose, good ventilation or bad ventilation have on litter? And we know then how litter can impact bird performance and health and welfare again.
So I suppose it's back to just what we touched a bit there on the airflow itself. So obviously your good ventilation system, if it was running how as close to as good as it can be, will be, obviously you'd be removing that moisture from the house all the time. So that's obviously going to benefit your litter quite a lot, and which obviously will hopefully reduce the issues of hawk and podo and things like that in the bird themselves. Um, but as I say, that's very important. That airflow, your negative pressure, just being correct. If people have pressure sensors and things like that, um, and then it's back to the same thing. If you had your ventilation system creating drafts, etc., you would potentially have a lot of that moisture falling on your litter, which obviously would start to cause, you know, issues with birds and performance itself. If the ventilation wasn't just working correctly, it can create as much of an issue with the draft on a bird performance wise. The bird will obviously, feel cold, huddle up, and they won't just eat the same and obviously not convert the same weight. But yes, look, there's a lot of there's a lot of does come back to just that airflow being correct, like we touched on earlier on. But I suppose yes, air dropping on your litter can cause a lot of issues, obviously with damp litter, and obviously cause your hawk and podo and things.
Okay, so you mentioned there just about pressure sensors. What exactly is the pressure sensor, or what can producers do in their own houses, smoke test those pressure sensors to get an idea on ventilation?
So just as you said there, Rebecca, the smoke testing themselves, like it's very hard obviously to get somebody around all the time to smoke your house and see how your airflow is going correctly. But you can buy smoke pellets yourself, you can like get them readily on Amazon or a place like that, some even like I said, Davidson places would be holding them maybe and that, but uh you can light the smoke pellets yourself and see how your airflow is moving in the house. Um, Negative pressure sensors. There's obviously your blood gauge. If you've ever seen them before, I would call them blood gauge, but they're basically a gauge on the wall with a pipe internal and a pipe external, and then there's liquid inside the gauge, and it'll obviously travel up as the suction comes onto the house. Now, obviously, different sizes of house need slightly different pressure. It's very hard to say one fits all. So that's why it's good if a grower had 3 or 4 houses on the one site, it's good to smoke all the houses. I wouldn't always just say, oh, if you smoke one, put the same as in one house into the next, because just how the houses are sitting and how the houses are tucked into different landscapes does make a difference on how your pressures would be, and how different airflows can change up again banks and that. But as I say, the electronic ones will read exactly onto the computer. You'll be able to see the PA and Pascals reading on the computer. If I suppose they were trying to make changes to try and help that, it will always be on the like of the inlets. So if they were able to, because certainly there probably is some systems out there, maybe a bit more manual, and guys can manipulate them a wee bit. If you were trying to get more pressure, you would close your inlets back, and if you're trying to get less pressure, you would open your inlets up, and that would just let more air in, which would drop the pressure, obviously. So to sort of put it into context, how they would know that if they were smoking their house, if you had lit your smoke in the house and obviously your air was coming through and dropping in the first 2 or 3 foot, your pressure's too low. So your air is coming in and dropping. And then obviously if you were starting to close your inlets back, you would start to see that air move maybe another 3 foot or whatever it may be. Or you just need to be conscious that you don't close them too much and your air will start to overshoot the house and land on the far side, which could equally cause you as much litter issues on the far side as it would from coming in and dropping.
Okay, again, plenty of tips and tricks there. And I suppose just to finish us off, what are your top tips for a farmer to ensure ventilation is set up correctly, and to ensure that it's working correctly in those different weather conditions as well?
I suppose the biggest thing I would always have said, Rebecca, is, and it's nearly one of the most important things you can quickly look at, and you don't have a lot to do to make sure it is what it is because we see it quite commonly a lot. Is if you had the like of a fan not working, but there was a damper on it and the damper was open, but that fan wasn't working, you obviously would have backdraft coming down through that. So I suppose what I'm sort of saying is fans themselves are all working. Your damper controls, if you do have damper controls, are all opening and closing as they should do. If they should be open, they should be open. If they should be closed, they're closed. And not a fan running or not running. Your inlets themselves, a lot of all inlets are on strings. So even just a small check that all your strings are as they should be, or how each manufacturer wants them to be. Obviously the side motors, if you have side motors, are working correctly, and are actually opening to where you need them to be. And obviously, as I say, all inlets strung on as they should be, because potentially if you're sort of trying to do your best and get the system set, um, but getting all one component's not doing what it should be doing for you, it's a very hard job to try and set something that if you had one motor wasn't just working correctly, that the rest is, but you will also get a different airflow from that corner or that quarter, if you like. As I say, that's sort of nearly one of the biggest things that I could say about just keeping an eye on your ventilation, firstly and foremost, that everything's actually doing what it should be doing before you start to go and make any changes. And then obviously, if you were confident enough to start that smoking a house, if you could start to smoke a house and see how your airflow is actually going, and then from that, look, some guys may need help from their manufacturers, equipment suppliers, or whatever, just on how to make it manipulate. But there is some may be able to work it themselves. It will start to make big changes for you, and you should hopefully start to see litter dry up. If you were having issues, and birds themselves start to feel a bit more comfortable in the atmosphere.
Brilliant. Stephen, thank you so much. There's an awful lot in that for our listeners and our producers to take note of, and potentially, as you say, make changes if they feel confident of it. Thanks a million again for your time. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you.
That's all from today's podcast. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to rate, review and follow the Poultry Edge wherever you get your podcasts.